Welcome to the MTD podcast. I'm Giovanni Albanese, hosting today's show, a passionate engineer and a very proud member of the MTD team. It's always a pleasure to return to this fantastic engineering facility, the UK headquarters of DMG MORI, based in Coventry. £1 billion global organisation and world-leading supplier of machine tools, automation and technology. Together we have embarked on a podcast journey looking at all aspects of the UK business and finding out what makes it so successful. Today we will be covering, in my opinion, an aspect that's so important and a bit of a game changer within our industry, DMG MORI UK Finance. It's great to be joined by three special guests today. Firstly, Steve Finn, an industry leader, ambassador for engineering and managing director of DMG MORI UK. Steve, it's a pleasure to be back.
Hi Gio, it is great to be back and great to have the opportunity to spread the word.
No, brilliant, and thanks again for having us back. We also have the pleasure to be joined by James Clist, director at DMG MORI UK Finance. James, not met you before personally, so it's great to meet you and really looking forward to this podcast.
Likewise, Gio, I've seen a lot of your work and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And finally, we also have the pleasure to be joined by our very own MTD's Mark Deadman. Mark started his publishing career in 1993 and has been involved with manufacturing industry since 1994, working with some of the top publications ever since. In 2014, Mark became a proud director for MTDCNC. Hello, my friend.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Mark.
It's nice to be back to DMG MORI. I must admit, the showroom, you guys have been really busy. There's a lot of stock there, isn't there?
We've been super busy throughout the last 6 months and bringing stock in for a time that the market's really picking up. So it's interesting times for all of us. There is shortages of everything, but we're doing our best to overcome that.
Yeah. James, I've been really looking forward to this one. Before we start, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and a little bit about DMG MORI Finance?
Yeah, of course. Well, Gio, my journey through machine tools was one I started in 1989, and I didn't know one end of a machine tool from the other, which I guess is not out of kilter with a lot of people in the asset finance industry. There are some specialists, but very few and far between. I started working for a machine tool financing specialist in 1991, full-time. So this August marks 30 years in machine tools for myself. I started working with DMG MORI, or Morisiki as it was, through Frederick Pollard and Company in 2001. That then morphed into MS Pollard in 2005, then Morisiki UK in 2006. And through that time, little by little, I learnt and I listened, and that helped shape my experience to the point whereby when the companies merged in 2012, I was asked by the then CFO of Europe to run DMG MORI Finance in the UK, but really as a brokerage. So we were using various German banks that the groups had relationships with. Some deals sailed through, as they always will, but the greyer deals, more tricky deals, they were still headaches, even with the might of DMG MORI behind it. And it was only when in 2017 that we gained the full access of sterling funding through DMG MORI Finance in Germany that we were able to really help influence and disrupt the market.
So, in my opinion, I stated it in my intro really, to me, it seems like DMG MORI Finance is a game changer within the industry. Would you guys both agree with that, Steve and James?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. I mean, I report to a chap called Manfred Wehrmann, who is the managing director of DMG MORI Finance in Germany. And he is someone that understands machine tools intrinsically. And he understands that what the effect of an investment will make on a company's finances. So when you say it's a game changer, it's probably because we generally underwrite deals looking forward and not looking back to what's happened on paper 12, 21 months ago.
Which is a really important point as COVID. There's a lot of companies that have struggled in the last 12 to 18 months. But, and I think there are some banks that would look at that, and that's a bit of a risk. We look at it moving forward, as James said. What are you doing? What's your order book? What's the amount of material that's coming through the shop? How are you doing it? What's your staff levels? So kind of a different view on it and encouraging manufacturing. That's really what's behind it, encouraging the growth of manufacturing.
So, James, are you actually saying that you actually look at the asset rather than just the finance and their banking history effectively?
What's very important is to understand the asset. And we, at the present moment in time, we're running a campaign, top seller campaign, that covers the 41 top selling machines within the range. And these are machines which pretty much will fit in any customer's portfolio. So yes, we know how they depreciate. We obviously have a massive customer base throughout Europe. We've got DMG MORI used machine to support us if a machine does come out. But generally, we've been able to help customers keep their spindles, even at a reduced level, run at a reduced level through this current time, so that they can come out of the pandemic in good shape.
Many years ago, 10 years ago, when I was on the road covering UK, Wales and Ireland, it was only infrequently, really, that I would see a DMG MORI machine in a small subcontractor shop, now I'm seeing them all the time. You've made your machine tools accessible to all, and would you say it's really opened up new markets for you in the UK to clients that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily assumed to kind of knock on their door?
Yeah, I mean, we've something like 65-70% of our business goes to subcontracts, and subcontract can be as affectionately what I call Fred in the shed. And literally, we have got customers where there's one individual, and we've got, as we spoke on a video some while back, Mark, one of your videos, customer who took a machine with a robot, and the robot was his mate. That was him and the robot in the factory. That's it.
That was a startup, wasn't it?
That was a startup. So the startups have actually been, for us, we've actually financed quite a few startups, which in the past was a no-no. They'd look at getting second-hand machines in, but actually we look at how we can grow those companies. And I think James will come on a little bit later and talk about the retention and the repeat business on that one. But we've gone into people, and people have bought machines from us that they never thought they could.
I think it's astounding, really. I mean, you mentioned COVID, and one thing that COVID has highlighted is that people that didn't invest seem to be the ones that are not competitive at the minute, and they seem to be struggling, in my opinion. You're giving everyone, or putting everyone on the same, on a level playing field, if you like. Companies that potentially thought that a DMG MORI was out of their price bracket are now, competing with bigger companies, being more competitive because they are investing in the latest technology. But do you also offer the support that comes with a DMG MORI, not just the finance package? How do you work with your clients?
Yeah, we've had good growth throughout the COVID. We've worked, and I've said before in these podcasts and on videos, I do not put the shutters down when something happens. I've been through lots and lots of different situations, the Lehman Brothers, 9/11, the recessions back in the early 90s, and every time I've learned from that you don't put the shutters down and let the wind blow over. You face it full on and you make things happen. And it's sometimes very painful to do that and costly, but we've been beneficial of that. We've just employed another 4 people in the engineering and application side of the business. So we're growing that side to support, as you said there, how do you support it? Because our customer base is growing as well. So yes, we grow with it.
It's quite interesting. I was walking around the showroom with Paul, who was doing some videos on some of your stock machines, and where I've seen this change, Dave, is you look at your impeccable NMV 3000, for instance.
Beautiful machine.
I would never have seen that machine in general subcontractors, I would say, probably 5 years ago, but now you're seeing a lot more. But when you come into the marketplace, a really, really competitive marketplace with VMC, with the M1, starting just over 55 grand, for instance, that is a spectrum which is so different to what it was sort of maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
It is a broad spectrum, but the important thing is that every customer is treated the same, because irrelevant of the value of the machine, the investment means the same to every single customer. The beauty that we have is that by being able to put absolute market-leading residual values on machines, we can bring the monthly cost down. And that allows customers to be competitive. So whilst the headline price is the headline price, we can never get away from that, and there's always complete transparency. What we've been able to do is to give the customer a monthly rate which challenges anything else in the market.
And kind of, you mentioned that you're funding this yourselves. You know, what difference does that make? I mean, how did you do it? You mentioned briefly how you did it before, but now that you can fund it yourself, are they potentially earning money before they're actually paying you back? What kind of finance packages do you offer, and how important is this, James?
One of the key factors in this has been the ability and the way that Steve's business managers have embraced finance. Because traditionally, in the marketplace, the salesman goes out, he comes up with a technical solution, he puts it forward with a quotation, and let's just use an arbitrary figure of £200,000. When a customer looks at that last page of the quote, that's just a financial headache, it's a problem. How is he going to fund it? Has he got to pay a deposit? Has he got to fund a VAT? Has he got to give guarantees? What's his trading looking like over the last 12 months? And what we've been able to do with the business manager's support is really embrace what we can do. One of our standard deals is a 6-month skip, which means the customer gets the machine delivered, installed, commissioned, and then the clock starts ticking. So he has 6 months to generate any income before he makes his first monthly payment.
And when you
take deposit.
Or deposit.
Yeah.
And when you take something like the NMV, and you've got, I think you can get, quite a few pallets on that, can't you?
34 pallets standard.
Yeah. So you imagine you're doing some very, prismatic work on that. That could be over £100,000 in 6 months.
Easily.
Steve, we've been fortunate enough to be in your workshop today looking at some of the latest technology, and I would assume that number one, before you sell any machine, is looking at their application, as you mentioned,
yes,
and making sure that the machine is fit for the work that they do. But then also, how do you gauge their return of investment? What kind of return of investments do you look at? And with that in mind, are you seeing kind of trends of once they've purchased their first machine, they're quickly moving on to their second, and for brand new DMG MORI users? I
think this is a very important element, and certainly with regard to the launch of the M1 machine, which will be followed next year with the T1 turning machine, is that suddenly we're opening up a brand new type of customer. So we have customers that can come into the brand with DMG MORI, they make their first investment, they start making money, and then suddenly other avenues open up, whether that's into prismatic 5-axis machining, whether that's into horizontal machining, multi-axis CNC turning. The list is endless, as you appreciate.
So effectively, they're growing with you, so they can start on a 3-axis and move all the way through your range.
Sure. And I think going back to your question there as well, how do you actually work with a customer for a rate of return? And everyone is different because it depends on what their hourly rate is that they're charging out or what they're receiving from their goods. But you're 100% right, and we spoke about this in previous podcasts. We put it on a technical footing in the first place. So it's got to be technically strong, and a technical solution has got to be robust. Once you've got that, you can then work with the customer on the returns. And it bluntly comes down to a monthly cost, which is a lot easier. When you're dealing with a piece of equipment that traditionally you would see sitting around your neck for the next 15 years, all sorts of things must be going through the customer's minds about, how do I pay for this? What do I do with it in 5 years' time? Is it the right technology? Is it future-proof? Is all these kind of things? Well, of course, the way we're doing things, it gives the customer the opportunity to change out, maybe 3 or 5 years, that kind of thing, change the technology. But if you put it down to a monthly cost, he can suddenly, or he or she, can understand exactly what their commitments are and what's going out. And suddenly all these million questions that become just into God's business, because we don't know how to control that, suddenly come back to your monthly cost. So it's very, very simple. But good technical standing is where it all emanates from.
Now, James, I think on my last count, you've got in the portfolio 155, 156 machines. Does the actual finance cover all areas, milling, turning, additive manufacturing, automation?
Absolutely. Everything that DMG MORI provides, we will fund.
Including grinding.
Did I miss that? Sorry, Steve.
You missed grinding machines. We do a fantastic grinding machine, both vertical and horizontal.
Yeah, and when you look at the customer, I mean, a lot of the customers are talking about, cost per part. But you, as a bank manager, for instance, you wouldn't know what cost per part is. But you, as a finance within engineering, James, you would, because you've learnt that. There must be a big difference, isn't there?
It is a big difference, and it's taken a long time to get to this level of knowledge. To understand the range, to understand what a machine can do to a customer's business, particularly with automation now coming in and being such a regular part of the machines that we finance. It gives me a great amount of confidence when automation's involved, because very, very, very quickly you can see the customer's thought about this. He's thought about how we can utilise expensive labour in other parts of the business, automate a machine for a relatively simple process, and really maximise returns on machines through lights out machine, either overnight or through the weekend.
I think that automation really stands out when you go into your showroom now. Most machines are equipped with DMG MORI automation solutions, and you've got lots of various solutions for a multitude of applications. Now, ultimately, again, going back to competitiveness, and you mentioned, this is helping the industry. It's really helping the industry in the UK because it's making end users or large OEMs competitive, not just in the UK, but around the world to reshore work. Are you seeing a lot of this? And are you seeing this as a real partnership and collaboration with all of your clients that will span way into the future?
Yeah, I think that reshoring work, we are definitely, I wouldn't say a lot, because I think we see some, our competitors see some, but I think manufacturing in general is benefiting enormously from that. And we are certainly helping customers to go down that road and make sure that they become competitive, because the real problem with reshoring work is that it doesn't come back at a different price. It comes back at the price that was done at the low-cost economies. So when you then introduce various technologies like automation, and James says that he can then see the whole thing's lighting up a bit better, it's because the automation is going to run the spindle that much longer, and therefore, again, the hourly rates come down, become more competitive. Return on investment.
James, you're very close to the business managers, as much as I am and my colleagues at MTDCNC. When we're seeing end users, a lot of them are saying, I have to buy the best equipment because some of the OEMs are starting to outsource more. They're not doing it in-house. So are you seeing that as well?
It's very clear that certain OEMs have made clear statement that they want to manufacture less in-house post-pandemic, and they want to subcontract. And in outsourcing that work to the subcontract base, whether it's first, second, third tier, generally that will mean that someone's got to buy a new machine, they've got to make an investment, and with that comes risk. It's my job to help mitigate that risk, so that if a company needs to invest to fulfill, say, a 3-year contract, that we can write a contract which matches that, and as Steve said earlier, really future-proof the business.
And that's where you get your repeat orders, I suppose.
Well, we've been very fortunate since we started this operation here in the UK in 2017, and assets managed now by DMG MORI Finance in the UK, I think exceed 82.5, maybe 83 million pounds. We have 100% customer retention rate.
Wow.
It says it all, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. Steve, can I mention some real-life applications in this podcast?
Of course.
So whilst we've been on the road, we're obviously travelling the length and breadth of the country. These are some really good real-life success stories. Nurch Engineering, Bedford CNC, MCNC are just a few that I've picked out. But, let's start, with MCNC. The growth at that company with Mark Wilde is absolutely extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. It's a really super shop. I've been down there a few times and it's really run well. And they've got some great engineers Lee, who's like the plant manager kind of guy there, he does a super job with the machines and making sure he gets good productivity. But there's a company that's got a very, very nice showroom to bring their customers into. They've invested in the latest technology. They've got a whole host of different things like the DMF 5-axis, the DMU 5-axis, the NLX 3000, big chunky lathe, for big billets. So they can go right across the customer base. And that's what I think Mark wanted. He wanted that versatility to be able to offer his customers and beyond capacity.
I mean, it's a great showroom for you as well, Steve, for people that don't travel up to the Midlands. But I mean, I can remember when Mark started off with just a handful of machines, and is this what you expect to see from clients that embark on this journey with DMG Mori?
Well, it depends on the capability of the company in question. It depends on the capabilities of the individuals, and it depends on where they want to take it as a business. Aspirations. Some have different aspirations. But each customer has, a big issue, and that is the finance. How does he manage it? That's the finance of the whole business. How does he manage it? What does he do with it? And this is where James comes in. So my business managers can do a great technical proposal. They can also offer the commercial element of it, but James is the refined side of it, and he can advise on things outside of the machine tool, which he often does to customers. Certain tax breaks, certain advantages of when you should actually finance and when you shouldn't, how you operate the lease, all these kind of questions which are a big headache for customers. And that's what James will take us through. We've also shown, I don't know if we want to publicise this too much, but we've shown great compassion throughout the pandemic. It's been very, very difficult for some companies have been flying, but some companies are really, really, it's been difficult for them. And James has stepped in and managed their process with them very, very well to make sure that they are here today and tomorrow.
It's quite interesting because I've been to MTNC a number of times, as you know, and I think that last count they had around about 22 machines, and Mark would not be able to afford all those machines if it wasn't for the finance. I think that's a great attribute. But also, I won't name the customer, but I was with one of your good customers, let's say, Steve. You probably know who it is, who said, "I don't need to use the finance, but cash is king, and I'm going to use it."
Yeah.
And that's what you're challenging, isn't it?
That happened just actually literally weeks within the country going into lockdown. And the guy is a very, very wealthy company. He's got more than enough cash, and the investment was over. It was about $750,000, but he decided to fund, I think, 500,000 of that. Was that? So we know who the guy is, and that was the important thing. He said, "I don't know what's going to happen here. I really don't." And here we are today. They're working well. They're exporting a lot of stuff, so they're good for the UK GDP as well.
Yeah,
I think from my side, it's always great, and this was pre-pandemic, that when we saw, we funded a small company and we funded maybe a much bigger machine relative to the worth of the company on paper. And when you see the following year's accounts and you see how much profit they've made and how the company has grown, that's the thing that gives me, that warm, fuzzy feeling, and you feel great about it. And now we've seen companies that have had some of that stripped back because of what's happened, but we can actually plot through when they started to turn the corner, whether it was in December or January or February of this year, and that gives us the confidence and ability to underwrite new business for them and to help them on their path out of this pandemic.
James, for listeners that may be listening to this podcast that may be thinking this is too good to be true, I'm sure you've met clients out there that already think this. What would be the initial steps for them to get in touch, and how would the process work with you in regards to you, looking at their business and meeting you or meeting DMG Mori? How would it work? Talk our listeners through.
Okay. As Steve said at the very outset, everything starts with a technical solution. But we also bear in mind that behind every machine tool requirement, there's a financial reason. And whether that's to to reduce costs from a night shift, to bring additional work in-house, everything is about a money decision. So really, once we've said, yes, there is a machine requirement, then I talk to the customer, We understand what they're trying to do. We'll put a financing proposal together. Generally, our standard finance proposal ticks the box for most customers because all they've got to do is look at 6 months. How much money can they make in 6 months before they make their first instalment? And in doing that, one, they're making a cash positive investment because there's no down payment. They haven't got to worry about VAT because our funding is treated as reverse charge because it comes from Germany. So there's no VAT to worry about, which on a £200,000 machine is significant, £40,000. And then we get into the realms of how much money can they make. And yes, we all know that DMG MORI is a premium brand. And with that comes a price point. Now, sometimes they'll utilise some of the cash that can be generated to offset the price point difference with a lower cost competitor. But by that stage, generally, the customer's bought in and said, yeah, we know we can be competitive with this platform, and we show the customer how much money he can make.
So give me an example, and I don't mean to put you on a spot, but just for engineers to actually understand it. Let's say I'm in a need for a turning or milling solution. You've got a lot of those out on the shop floor at the moment. I'm a new customer. On average, if I've said, that's the deal, but I need your finance, how long would it take for you to make that decision? Is there an average?
About a week.
Wow.
5 working days maximum. We've turned some deals recently around in 3 days. What's important, Mark, and let's focus on the M1 for a second. An average subcontractor in 3-axis vertical machining. You're out there all the time. You visit lots of companies using different platforms. What would you say the average charge-out rate is? Is it £30 an hour?
Funny enough, I was going to say 30,
okay.
Yeah.
So you pick £30 an hour. You pick a customer that runs that machine for, let's say, 8 hours a day. So that's £240 a day. You multiply that by 5, multiply it by 6 months. You work out how much money a customer can make before he makes his first instalment.
That's a lot because I'd have to use a calculator.
Funnily enough, you and I both, we should have made it the hourly rate a little bit.
But shouldn't you be working over the weekend to make it 7?
Well, you can do.
That's your extra pocket money, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. But that's the type of very simple discussion that we have. And Gio, I take your point. It probably does sound too good to be true, but experience and the number of machines financed out there, as I repeat, nearly 85 million now, that shows that we're here to stay. We're here to support customers through good times and bad. I mean, this has been an unbelievable time for us to work with it. I mean, I remember being sat over here in the middle of March last year, and everybody's phone and email went, and the email was from groups saying, if you're travelling to the factory in Bergamo, stop. No matter how close you are, no matter where you've travelled from around the world, turn around, don't go there. And we lived through history. And the important thing is that we're here to support customers' investment with DMG MORI, both existing customers and new customers.
So that's £85 million worth of machine tools that DMG MORI has financed.
Less what's been paid down since 2017.
Yeah. So that I think that shows you that this is a stable process, that it's an opportunity for people to continue with us as repeat business, and for new customers. This isn't something we're going to run out of money with or fly by night. This is a deeply thought out process right from the top with Dr. MORI about how he wants our business to support other businesses, and of course we're the beneficiary of it.
And also, that's quite an interesting thing to say is that through that period of time, one thing I've noticed is the badges changing on the machines. In other words, you're trying to give something back, not just something to the environment, but to engineers to try and be carbon neutral, because a lot of bigger companies and smaller companies now are really looking into this because there will be levies, won't there?
There will be levies. Carbon neutral is a really, really important thing. Our company has a very, very high profile on environmental matters. We have a guy called Dr. Eschweiler who heads that area up. We have many examples of how we try to help the environment. Our machines are produced and are sent out of the factories as carbon neutral, and that goes right through the supply chain about how we actually do that. I mean, it's not just about the fact that we buy green energy. I mean, we buy green energy here at Coventry, but it's about all the supply chain and all the people within that. It could be hundreds and hundreds of companies, but you have to do it for the environment. You have to have that, because if you don't, we're going to burn ourselves out and it's going to be a disaster. So DMG MORI have a huge responsibility for that sustainability.
I mean, just going back quickly, Steve, to your point, James, I think that it is an absolute genius business strategy from the top. You know, I think it's absolutely outstanding. I can understand as well why you've brought the M1 to the market, you know, in addition with this strategy, or in conjunction with this strategy. We were talking earlier about the sustainability and the carbon neutral footprint, Steve. You made some points about that, about, you know, 2031. You know, if we don't do something about this, you know, we're going to be in big trouble. But also the potential levies that could be introduced that are already in place in Europe. Is that correct?
They're already in place in Europe. If we carry on burning fuels the way that we're burning them today in the world, by 2030, which I think you'll see, Gio, no problem at all.
I hope so.
You know, but I tell you what, if we carry on, Australia won't see it. It'll be gone. It'll be frizzled. South Wales, I mean, the only place you'll be able to live in South Wales is in the top of Snowdonia, because it'll be flooded, you know.
It gets a bit cold up there in the winter,
Yeah,
I understand.
There's a few engineering companies
and
up there, actually.
Yeah, and you've seen the effects over the last, you know, the sudden storms, the biblical storms, you know, the high winds, you know, the extreme heats, and you've seen that. So the world is changing. We have to do something about it. And the levies, of course, will come where they will wipe out people's profits. So one of the things that DMG MORI can offer is, by supplying a carbon neutral piece of equipment, they can offset the customers' carbon footprint. And of course, inside the machine, there are green initiatives that we've got working to actually reduce power, to make sure that we're not leaking power and get better efficiencies out of things like transformers, to make sure that even when the machine's running, the customer is not producing high levels of carbon. But if he doesn't do something, he's going to bust. He's going to go bust with the levies.
Really interesting subject that is, Steve. It's something that, you know, I'd love to discuss in a lot more detail.
Can I just butt in, actually? Just one question to you, James. For any companies that are looking to invest in a new machine tool, and certainly looking at DMG MORI, because they should be, what would be your message to them if they don't know the finance element?
I think this very simple message is, there's a perception, and the perception, whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But there's a perception that this is, you know, one of the top 2-3 machine tool companies in the world. And with that comes a price point. All I will say is, please don't be perturbed. Look at the benefits that can be derived from buying cutting edge technology and the savings that can bring. And alongside of that, a financing structure that will make the investment affordable, but also cash positive.
Okay.
No, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Any last thoughts, Steve?
No, I just what James has summarised there is really important. You know, give us a try. I mean, you know, you've got nothing to lose, everything to gain.
No, guys, it's been a pleasure. James, brilliant to finally meet you in person and to speak to you, Mark. As always, it's a pleasure.
James, can I borrow a tenner to get back over the Dartford Tunnel tonight?
Do you know, Mark, I've not actually been to a cash point since March 2020.
Don't want to press the button. I went across the Dartford Tunnel the other week, and my wife forgot to pay the bill for 3 days.
Ouch.
Yeah, I got away with it, but could have been 70 quid.
Fair enough.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
but
guys,
I would have had to get on to James for that one. 70 quid. Yeah.
Easy terms are easily available.
Absolute pleasure. To all our listeners listening to this podcast, we really hope you've enjoyed it. Ultimately, it's about being a profitable business, and I'm sure DMG MORI UK will definitely be able to help you be as profitable as you possibly can. Let us know your thoughts about this podcast, and stay tuned to next week. Steve, you've got one final word?
Just one thing. We talk about the next podcast. We're going to do one on special projects.
Perfect. So there you have it. And when we're looking to do that, Steve?
Well, that'll be in a month's time, won't
month's
it?
time.
Some month's time.
Release date is probably going to be a little bit later than that. But thank you very much for listening. Until next week, the MTD podcast.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.